culture is one of the most important parts of your job and work. Going to another team or another job, finding that, they really don't focus as much on strategy. It's not always best to move companies every year or 2 years. There's one thing to take away from this. It's start with the end and then build backwards from there.
Hello, Mark. How's it going? It's superb to have you on the show.
Hello, thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate what you're doing here.
So let's get started. Tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I am Mark. I've been in design for about 12 years, and I just really love, capturing ideas and really taking it into a design space and expressing it visually. So, I studied that, and that's what I've been doing for all this time, and it hasn't gotten boring yet. So I'm happy to keep going for as long as I can.
That's a cool intro. It hasn't gotten boring yet. It has been like a decade. So yeah, that's good to know first. Secondly, tell us, your time at Sentius. It's been like a decade, right?
Yeah. I started with Sentius in 2012, back when I was in my first year of uni, actually. That'll date me, but yeah, it was a referral from a lecturer, and just sort of went in, had a bit of an interview, and they gave me work straight away. So as I was on the train on the way home, I started changing business card details, trying to get it off super quick and, show responsive and, eagerness to design with them. So started there as a, junior sort of graphic designer, and, just escalated from there and in terms of role and responsibility. And, I'm still happy to keep working there as long as I can. It's a great company, really great leadership. And of course, the main thing there is that it's always strategy first.
That's super interesting, because this is not I wouldn't say it's not common, but this is not what the current generation is kind of aspiring for, which is super longevity with one company. So this is fun, and this is something that I believe more people should think about. But what will you say, how has it been beneficial for you to not change companies in between and just stick to a good team and a good leadership? Because why not?
Yeah. Look, there is a bit of an industry sort of norm of changing jobs can help raise salary and, get new experiences. And both of those, I'm sure, are probably true. Not that I've experienced them myself, but there is an element of, outgrowing a role or a team. Whereas I find with Sentius, we really have, the strategy focus, which to me is something I'd be scared of losing. Going to another team or another job, finding that, they really don't focus as much on strategy, and it's a bit more on less objective metrics. Not that that's the case everywhere, but it's something I never wanted to lose, as well as, the focus on people first and team culture, all of that. But in general, I'd say for most people, it's probably worth considering whether, loyalty does actually pay off. In my experience, it has. It's been something that, I've been really happy with, and the team has always provided value, and I've felt like a valued member. And you really do want to consider whether, a role is suitable for you long term or not. Sometimes it's not, I guess, but for me, as long as there was opportunity to grow and keep doing what I love, I found that it was really helpful to stay with the same company, and they've appreciated that back as well. And I can see through time, you get additional responsibilities, career growth, and so on. So I'd recommend it for most people, but it really depends on the situation. And there are a lot of things that you can benefit from changing. The diversity of experience, I'm sure, is a positive thing. But, for me, as long as we're doing good work, being treated well, and the loyalty is paid off, I don't think I'd see myself moving.
That makes sense. And yeah, loyalty does pay off in work and life. I'm sure it has its super benefits, right?
Yeah, well, if there's like a smaller team, Sentius started with, I think I was the second or third employee there. So there was room to grow in that kind of role. But some massive companies, you don't really get noticed and don't get that attention of growth and personal sort of development. So with a smaller team, you have a bit more personalization, and now it's grown to over 50 employees that you just wouldn't necessarily have with some other larger agencies or companies. So, that's a factor as well.
So you've seen the growth, and you've actually contributed to the growth of Sentius for all these years, and that's why I think it's more beneficial, right?
Yeah, I'd say so. You get to have having direct access and contact with the leadership team, the CEO. The amount of learnings that you can have from those sort of relationships is really important and beneficial. But yeah, it's definitely not the same everywhere. So you have to do what you think is right. And, I guess the end learning here is that it's not always best to move companies every year or 2 years.
Total sense, makes total sense. What are like your top 5 learnings in a decade of experience?
Yeah, wow. Okay.
It's top 5.
The top learning, I would say, is that you have to think of the end goal. So when you're getting started in design, a lot of designers will focus on the limitations that they've been given, in terms of a brief, make sure everything is matching the brief and that you're on target. But as you grow, you need to think about whether that brief is even correct. Is that the best outcome, from the brief? And so reverse engineering design and goals and communication in general, this can work across industries, is starting with what you want to achieve and then working back from there. Because then you have all of the things that you need to hit and you just work back all the way to the brief. And then you can analyze the brief and say, if we do this, is it going to result in that? And so that's probably the top learning. And it's something that I didn't do at the beginning. I would just focus on getting the work done and making sure people were happy rather than focusing on whether the work would deliver results, which is something we do now. And yeah, I would just recommend people to think about those things for themselves and really add value, because then you can start asking questions that are, maybe going to put your clients off guard in terms of, is this going to be beneficial?
This is something that comes with only experience, right? This is the core of strategy focus as well.
Yeah, it is the core of strategy. It does, it is a major part of strategy. I think it came with experience for me, but it doesn't have to for everyone. Getting better at it and understanding it more holistically, will definitely help with experience. But today you can start with, what am I trying to achieve here? And are the steps I'm taking actually helping me do that?
And this is why we do these episodes, to fast track learnings.
Yeah, exactly. So, if there's one thing to take away from this, it's start with the end and then build backwards from there. The other probably learning, I would say, would be related to asking questions and how the power of questions, particularly open-ended questions, that leave an open response rather than a yes/no response, is just one of the most powerful things you can do in any industry, but definitely in design as well, design, branding, and so on, because you're really opening up the platform to what could be rather than what is. So that can happen in, personal relationships, professional relationships, with clients. Sometimes you'll have questions that will simply open up the client's mind, even though you're not giving answers. And that's probably the second most powerful learning that I have from
asking the right questions.
This experience. Up there would also be thinking about things holistically rather than in silos. So we have 3 units in our team. We have strategy, digital, and creative. And making things work across multiple functions is something that really drives extended growth. So having a top-down view, a more holistic view, almost like atomic design goes into, where you break things up into smaller pieces like bits of text, buttons, components, and then full pages. It's similar to just have as wide of a view on what you're trying to aim as possible. That's pretty high up there as well, I'd say. For the next 2, I'm not 100% sure what they would be, but something that comes to mind is that, in general, culture is one of the most important parts of your job and work, and creating an environment, that feels beneficial for both employees, clients, the wider team, is something that is probably often oversought. Like, people don't focus on it enough when looking for jobs or looking where to work, or even identifying the problems that they have with their current companies. your management and the people you work for and work with is one of the top reasons why people would leave, most likely. So from that, I would say, now being in a leader's position, one of the top things to focus on that wasn't always the case in my career is that the pressure should stop with you when it comes to your team. I want to create an environment for the team. We have 2-3 designers at the moment. We did have 4 at one stage, but I want to create an environment where the rest of the team feels like they can do their best work. And so that means if difficult things come on or timelines get extended out, we just want to protect, that creative environment from being overloaded with admin work or client frustrations and so on. So that's one thing. Yeah, that's one thing that is, more a part of leadership, I'd say, than it is design in general. But yeah, it's something
the culture
that
plays a huge impact in terms of creativity, in terms of design delivery, maintaining relationships, maintaining an internal culture as well.
Yeah, and as creatives, generally, we hate talking about money and, client, desires in that sense, or, the frustrations of admin. So to have it, and those will be part of probably any designer's role or, life at some point. So it does need to be the case, but, just sheltering those frustrations. And one of the things I tell the team is that they need to protect their calendars. And so what I mean by that is block out times that you think you'll need for each given task, because we work with a lot of clients and a lot of different tasks, but just put in an estimate there. Excuse me. Put in an estimate of how long you think something will take and fill out the days that you have in any given week or month, depending on how far in advance you're able to do it. But blocking out time means that you'll be able to start on time and finish on time. And when new requests come in for more work or more time, you can basically have a better idea of what your capacity is looking like. So that's one part of, whereas in the past there were many times where, I'd be asked, hey, look, can you do this? And I'd say yes, because I always wanted to please and get work done, especially if it came from my boss, the CEO. And I'd sort of end up, expanding my day to be really long and just not really have a big focus on the balance, which is one of our key focuses and values.
Nice. Yeah, these have been probably the most comprehensive points. So super awesome. Thank you for doing this. And now if we'll go into the core of both of us, which is strategy, I would love to know from you, where do you see the power and the implementation of strategy actually helping brands? And how do you see that happen?
Yeah. So I'd break it down. Firstly, strategy is essentially a guess or a hypothesis of what you think will work, of how you will be able to win in a certain industry or space. And so let's not overcomplicate this term strategy, because it does have a lot of different meanings and examples and uses. But essentially, you're just figuring out the how behind what you're trying to achieve.
Right.
And so implementing strategy really looks like whether you're communicating how you're going to achieve something clearly to the team, internally or externally to your prospect and prospective clients. So it's not so much a plan. A plan is more something that you'll do. So today I'll do, these 3 things, and then I'll send that email and whatever. You can control that because it's things you'll do. Whereas a strategy has an element of, guessing or expectation of how others will also react to it. Because if you're going to create a brand, you don't always know how the market will receive it. In fact, you almost never know. You might have a good guess, and you'll do a lot of good things to help it be received the way you want. But essentially, there's factors that you can't control. So that's sort of the difference between strategy and, a plan. But there are a lot of people, and even in our industry and work, that have strategic plans. So, how you're going to do something and then the steps you're going to take to make it work. So implementing strategy is more about understanding what it is, what it can do, and essentially how you're going to achieve something. So the way that you do that is you can base it on a number of frameworks. So you can have things like, the brand core, which is essentially who you are, what you do, who you're targeting, what you're planning to do. The strategy is how you're going to get there. So the brand core is often mistaken for strategy, and you just say the strategy is that we are this company with this mission and vision, and these
Right.
are our customers and so on. But it doesn't actually tell you how you're going to become the winner in a certain space, whether it's that industry or, in that space of, clients or customers or products or so on. So a strategy can be, a simple document that says, hey, this is what the industry looks like at the moment. This is why it's bad. Here is how we are going to change it. And here's how we're going to win. So we're going to do X, Y, Z, and we expect the market to respond in this way. And then branding
Makes total sense.
and branding and brand strategy is a similar approach in that brand strategy is basically how your brand, which is the collection of all of the feelings and perceptions that your customers have, how you're going to achieve that essentially, and how you're going to become the brand that has, inspiration or love or has the perceptions that you want to create within your market. So if you're Nike, you want people to feel inspired, confident, feel like you have technological advancements and good quality products and so on. So how do you achieve that? Well, you use a lot of branding elements, which pairs up with marketing and so on. But branding is essentially influencing all of those perceptions that you wish to create. So are you going to use, Comic Sans and, a lot of white space, or, photography that's handmade? Well, probably not, because you use your experience to realize that that's not the kind of influential material that will create inspiration, honoring of athletes and so on. So that's where the experience comes in. And that's why generally you'll go with an agency or a designer who has experience in the area that your client or industry that your client is in, because they've seen that you can do it before and now you can do it for them. But essentially it's the same principles. It's you want to create certain feelings and perceptions in your customer's mind, and so you're going to use these elements to do so. In the brand, we often think of the logo, which it is an important point, but it's generally not going to create a whole lot of perceptions on its own. It needs a lot of the additional elements as well. So it'll need, it'll be the colors, it'll be the typography, the imagery, video, all of that to help create the scene and set the scene of those expectations that you're hoping to create. But then you have a lot of other external factors to design, traditionally speaking, graphic design. Like, what do the stores look like? How do the customers treat you? Is there support after you've purchased the product, or did they sort of leave you high and dry? And all of these things will work together to create a feeling within your customer as to how they feel about you. So stepping back, strategy is, the hypothesis almost, or the guess, if we can use loose terms, of what will help you achieve something. And then brand is how people feel about you, and it's not in your control. So that's the thing that both of those two terms have in common. Brand is all about, how somebody feels about you and how, the collection of experiences and perceptions are formed in their minds. And strategy is how you expect them to feel based on, the X set of choices that you make or don't make.
Love these comprehensive answers, Mark. And I love this breakdown as well, that first there has to be an expectation setting, if you will, for strategy. That it is at the end of the day not a plan that you can just simply just take off and implement. There is some guesswork, there's insights, there's intuition, and the branding, of course, has to be a level on top of it, a layer on top of it, and like complementing it. Makes sense. Along these lines, you've answered my second question, which was on how branding impacts other brands and your competition as well. So that's awesome. And now I would want to know from you that it's been a decade and you've of course seen many things go haywire for sure. So where do you think people kind of do that mistake? When I say people, I mean designers do that mistake. Where do you think their brand design goes wrong?
Yeah. I think it does come back to the assumptions, right? So we have I've seen a few examples and, projects throughout this time that I've been working that a lot of times designers will want to jump to the extremes. And this is delicate and it's a difficult thing because the extremes are a bit easier to work with, and I'll give some examples. So say that you're creating a new sports brand, right? A lot of designers will say, well, it has to have the most premium look and have the best products and so on. And that might be the case for your client. But if it's not, realize that they might want to be competing on price. And so if they look more expensive than they actually are, sometimes those perceptions can create a disconnect, and therefore people won't even look at the prices, even though they're within the range. So I guess, let me step back. It's about creating the right expectations ultimately. And unless you know what you're trying to create, it's easier to jump to those extremes of the most luxurious or the most premium, or even the cheapest. It's a bit more rare to have something like that, but the most human or the most bold. Sometimes the ideal balance is somewhere in between all of those things. And we've had examples where we've had clients that have looked too premium for their own industry and space that had ultimately then had less engagement because of that. And so we think these things are good, but let's not jump to those conclusions, because we have to know exactly, the right perceptions to create the right feelings in order for us to then go ahead and design and try to hit those targets. So don't be afraid to, be somewhere in the middle. Like, you think of brands like Aldi, for example, great brand, great products, great prices. If they were to look like the most premium, almost Whole Foods like store, they'd probably end up losing some customers, because you can't generally be the best and the cheapest. There's usually a disconnect there for customers. Something doesn't really work. You can be the best and the most expensive, or, not the best and the cheapest, but it has to be a believable story and experience for a customer. You're going to be like, hey, these Nike shoes are $10. Probably not, right? It's probably, if it's too good to be true, it probably is false. So yeah, you have to sort of be aware.
Makes sense. And a lot of, again, expectation setting is kind of the key, which is what sort of message are you putting out? And this reminds me of an example here in India. So there's a car company called Tata, and they launched something called Tata Nano, and it was a super small car, just super affordable. And that's what they messed up. They didn't call it affordable. The messaging was it was one of the cheapest cars ever. And again, based on that industry, specifically to that industry, people don't want to be in the cheapest innovation or invention. They want to at least feel safe. Doesn't matter if the car costs $10,000 or $15,000. I don't mind it. I first want my safety at least. So even though it probably was safe enough, but that wasn't the communication, and that's where the sales messed up, the revenues messed up as well. Makes sense.
Yeah. It's all about having a consistent message, and it has to be consistent over a long period of time with the right users as well. So for example, Mercedes, right? Mercedes is known for their luxurious cars, powerful engines and good experiences, but they're also not the cheapest, right? They're not the most expensive, but they did want to create a car that was more affordable. So if they had done that under the Mercedes brand name, it would have been a disconnect. It would no longer, the people that bought the expensive cars and, the nicer general Mercedes branded cars would feel like their brand is no longer as luxurious or premium if there's a $10,000 car on the market. So what did Mercedes do? They created the smart car, a different brand to have a different, position in the market. It was the smaller one. Most people have probably heard of it. It's not really as popular anymore as it was, 20, 30 years ago. But then you have two different brands that can set different expectations and serve different markets. And it's a similar thing with Toyota that did the opposite, with the Lexus. People weren't going to pay the premium prices for a Toyota, so they created the Lexus brand that had the luxurious, features and elements. And now there's, it's still the same parent company that owns them, but the expectations and the prices can vary because of the consumer basis.
Right. And similarly, like as far as the Toyota example, Tata also wanted to kind of dip its hands in the luxury car market. So Jaguar is owned by Tata now.
Okay.
And I'm super happy that they didn't touch their branding or anything. They just let it be, because Jaguar comes with its own heritage and its own luxury aesthetic and appeal. So
right. Yeah. You got to keep the brand and those expectations and, the branding.
Respecting the brand equity, basically.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Finally, we have to address the elephant in the room. AI is here. How are you guys using it? And how has it kind of impacted you in your personal life and your work life?
Yeah. Yeah. Look, AI it's a big topic at the moment, one that we're going to be looking into further over the next sort of 6 months. At the moment, it's a big sort of help with the thinking. And what I mean by that is through, the chat GPTs or the Geminis, it's quite beneficial, especially for creatives, to have someone to bounce, I'll say someone, but it's AI, to bounce ideas off and to get, refined copy perhaps, at least to the stage, not that a copywriter would have it, but, to a stage where it's a bit more refined and it takes a lot less time to use. So that's something that, we use a lot in terms of the thinking, or bouncing ideas off or refining copy. But we also use it through design software as well. So whether it be in, the Adobe suite with all of the 3D effects and so on of Firefly, or, a bit more basic usage of the generative fill within Photoshop, that's quite a game changer for a lot of designers and creatives, because you used to not be able to extend images for certain proportions because the content aware fill tool, it just couldn't predict what was there. It was good at filling in patterns and so on, but it couldn't create the bottom of the shoe or extend the desk in the building. So those are some little high quality of life improvements that AI is able to do, and to a really good standard within Photoshop and a few of the other Adobe suite applications. But there's some further ones that I've seen, more of the website builders from prompts, and creative campaign rollouts from prompts. So those are things that we'll be looking into a bit further, but I'm not quite sure if it's there yet. It's more of a good starting point, like the chat GPTs, to sort of get you going and maybe have a few ideation, examples and so on. But, that's probably the extent that we're at in terms of AI at the moment. There's a lot further we can, a lot of things we can do. We found that the mid journeys and the image generators from scratch have a similar view, kind of styling a lot of the time, and you can tell what's AI generated and what's not a lot of the time. So we haven't really been using that for a lot of our content, but you do see it out in the wild a fair bit. Like we saw this coffee sign the other day that had this 3D looking cup of coffee, but all of the letters were jumbled up below on the cup, so it wasn't quite there. But it's interesting to see the way that small businesses and other brands are using AI at the moment.
Right. I've heard the same things. I've been speaking to other agency founders, and they all say the same thing, that the majority of the implementation right now is in the brainstorming, ideation, all those phases.
Yeah, it's really good with the ideation or content ideas, and certain plans and ways to lay things out. So it's something that we found still needs a lot of human, editing or input, and we wouldn't really use it for a lot of client-facing work, but it does help, get the ideas going or refining some things.
Cool, super awesome. This was such a crisp, chill conversation. You're one of the chillest guests ever. You have a YouTube channel?
No, I don't.
You should start one. Your insights are crisp. You have one-liners throughout. Super fun. It was a great conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. No, thanks, Brad. Appreciate the time and what you're doing here with the podcast and everything on LinkedIn as well. I'm sure we'll have another chat soon.
Thank you.
Alrighty.